Hi, Major Sean Merritt with the United States Volunteer Rangers. I'm going to do a quick video tonight about knives. Knives are a very important part of our Ranger tradition, just like the tomahawk. And we concentrate on the tomahawk a lot. We're going to do a whole video about tomahawks and how to pick one and how to modify it. Tonight we're going to talk a little bit about knives, because they're an important part of bushcraft, woodcraft, and camping, what have you, and definitely a part of our emergency services aspect of our organization. So they pretty much cover the gambit. And we're going to talk a bit about how they're used and how to choose one based on on what it is you're going to do with them. And from there, we're going to work on the fundamentals of use in another video. But for now, we're going to show how to pick one out, to pick what's good, what's not, and what to look for. You don't necessarily have to pick the knives that I'm showing you, but they're a pretty good choice. But it should give you an idea of what knives you might want to look for and what to look for in a good knife. We're going to talk a little bit about steel. We're going to talk a little bit about what kind of steel you want it made out of and what kind of steel you may not want to, and the places where to purchase knives where you may want to avoid that. So let's get started with that. Okay, let's get started. We're going to talk a little bit about the knives and what we call the philosophy of use. Like a mechanic and his toolbox, each knife has a function, and some of them overlap. Like you can use an adjustable wrench to turn multiple bolts, and so on and so forth. You use different sizes of screwdrivers can sometimes work, but the best thing to do is to pick the knife that you're going to use for the task at hand. Now, that doesn't mean you're carrying a pile of knives into the woods, but it does mean that if you're going to do a certain job, like you're going to skin out a deer, you may want to choose a different knife than if you were going to do just bushcraft. If you're going to be using it for a rescue tool, you may choose a different knife than you use for bushcraft. And likewise, bushcraft, you may not want to use the rescue tool. There's also specialty knives, what some people call survival knives. Now, they are specialty in the fact that they're usually a bigger knife, and they have other functions and stuff like that, but we'll get into that in a second. So let's start out with what we call our baseline. And mind you, I'm going to admonish you to say that this knife here that I'm showing you is not a representation of the modern version of this knife. This is the one I had in the car. This is the Mora Craftline 511. Now, this is their old pattern. Their new one is different, but the purpose is the same. The Craftline 511 by Mora Neve, I think is the way they pronounce it, is a phenomenal blade for its price. You can get these in for anywhere from $8 to $12. Okay, and unlike some of the $8 to $12 knives you might pick up at a big box store, this cuts. It holds a good edge. It's easy to sharpen if you know how, and will serve you for a long time for its intended function. It is a cutting knife only. You're not going to baton with this knife. You're not going to be. This isn't a knife. This is a knife you need to put in tandem with your tomahawk. You absolutely have to, because of the fact that you're not going to be splitting anything with this. But for basic carving and knife-like functions, this knife can't be beat. They come with a hard plastic sheath. The new ones have a clip. This one has the old button style holder, but they're a good hard plastic sheath, and you can and they clip onto belts and molly gear and all kinds of good stuff. And I highly recommend you grab one. There's an upgrade to it called the Companion, which again I don't have here with me today, but I actually own a couple, and I own a bunch of these Moras, to be honest, and they're just a fine knife. Now let's talk a little bit about the SE4. SE is an American-made company versus the Swedish company that's here, and they have this American company is phenomenal with their with the quality of their cutlery, and they have probably the best warranty I've ever heard of. I mean, I could buy a knife from them, and I don't recommend doing this because it's still silly. And I said, today I feel like I might like to chop on a railroad rail, and I break the knife because that's bad for knives, and they'll replace it. That doesn't mean you want to abuse the policy, and it's silly to do so. You get a good knife, you make it yours. You get used to using it. And each knife is different, even if it's a semi-production knife like that. But the SE4s, they range in at about 120 bucks. I know it sounds hefty, but with the warranty that they have and the quality of the tool, they are a 1095 high carbon steel blade. This one's coated. I have another one that's uncoated. You do need to maintain the blades on these in terms of keeping them oiled and dry. So once you're done using them, you dry them off, and when you get home, you put a little oil on them. You can even carry a little bit of oil into the field with you. You'll notice most of the knives I'm going to show you today are high carbon steel. The high carbon steels tend to hold an edge better. That's not always the case, but for today we're going to talk. This is what I prefer. I will talk a little bit about the other steels later, but let's move on a little bit here. Well, before we do that, let me talk to you about the SE line. Now, this is the SE4, which tells you that there are other numbers. Well, it's actually because of the length of the blade. It's a little over 4 inches, and it's one of the most comfortable knives I own. It's handy. It's just the right size to do the majority of the outdoor tasks that I do. So I highly recommend, if you're looking for a good long-term knife, this is one of the ones to go to. Let's move on here. These are what we call a multi-purpose knife, obviously. This one can apply in our emergency services aspect. In fact, this one lives on my chest rig. In fact, I picked this one up because it's coated, because the high carbon steel, it does rust, and if I have it left it on my chest rig for a while, sometimes a little bit of rust can form. Let's move on to, these are definitely going to be, what I'm going to show you next is going to be a bushcraft items. They are bushcraft knives. We're going to start out with an original. This one here is, before bushcraft was bushcraft, this was a bushcraft knife. This is a Russell Green River Hunter. These are another low cost item, but you have to provide your own sheath or create your own sheath. These are definitely in the bushcraft and woodcraft genre. This pattern of knife has been around since the 1800s, as well as the company. You do, when you get them, I did a little bit of work on the handle. I sanded the handle a bit, and because if you see this checkering on here, can get a little high in terms of it's a little bit rough on the hands, at least my hands. So I sanded it down. I put a coat of lacquer on it, or linseed oil rather. I didn't use lacquer for a reason. We'll talk about that in the Tomahawk video. But it has unlike the Mora, it has the same kind of grind as the SE4. This is what's called a full flat grind. Both of these are good designs for carving in woodcraft. This one's a little stronger for woodcraft things, but they both work very well. In fact, the Scandinavian grind of the Mora is very popular amongst the bushcraft crowd, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But these go in around $25–30. Again, a very good quality knife. There are a lot of reviews on them, and they've been around for a long time. They're a very historical knife. Reenactors tend to carry them. Next on our line is another SE knife. Okay, but this actually represents a pattern of knife used by one of the deans of bushcraft and woodcraft, Horace Kephart. All right, I'm actually presenting it more because of the pattern than because of the knife itself. It's a brilliant knife, don't get me wrong, but it's another SE, 1095 high carbon steel, micarta grip. But this one here is going to be a much more it's a much more multi-purpose pattern. It's got a very you can see how the tip is, the point. It's got a very, very good point, but it's a strong point. Horace Kephart used this particular pattern to great effect through his travels. And if you don't know who Horace Kephart is, you should definitely look him up on Amazon and pick up some of his books, including Camping and Woodcraft, which is one of his best. This is a saber style grind, which I am not as much a fan of, but it is a strong grind, and that makes it hold. It's a tougher knife. I would not be averse to batoning with this. It is, and I've used it in that particular function many times. It does have, now we're getting into the bushcrafty aspect of it. It does have a 90-degree spine, which allows you to spark your ferro rod. But this pattern of knife, you can get it through a number of companies for various prices, and it's just a phenomenal design. I wish it had a full flat grind, but that's just me. Moving on, let's talk a little bit about these little guys. All right, this is definitely what we call a specialization. All right, this is what we call part of your first line. All right, and both of these can go into that. This is a Swiss Army knife. Everyone's seen it. Anyone's watched MacGyver has seen it. This is just one I happen to have on me. They make various models, including locking blade models. This gives you a lot of function in your pocket. It won't do the heavy work of a sheath knife, but it'll do a lot of things. And depending on which model you get, has various tools on it. But again, this sits in your pocket. It's always there. You can keep it in your pocket if you're smart. You put it back in your pocket every time you're done using it, even if you're going to use it again later. Remember that. That's an important thing to do. Every time you're going to use this knife, once you're done with it, you put it right into your pocket and then open it up again when you're ready to use it again. That'll make sure you never lose it. Now this is another Mora, believe it or not. This is their Eldridge, I think it is. I'm pretty sure I'm not saying that right. But this little knife here is another pocket knife. It's just a fixed blade pocket knife. There are a lot of these sorts of knives around. You've seen some of my other videos, me using another Essie that is definitely a fixed blade pocket knife called the Azula. But these are very specific functions. They allow you to have a stronger pocket knife in your pocket. Again, this is another first line knife. You can hang it off your neck. And this one here came with a ferro rod, which gave them a survival mindset to it. It gives you basically a kit in your pocket. It's strong, it's versatile, and it's small. You can see how small this is. But small, right? And then you get to the blade itself. Got a 90-degree spine, and it's good and thick. I mean, this is a seriously robust little blade, and I put a lot of use into this since I've gotten it. Let's move on. This is what we consider to be the classic bushcraft knife. This is a knife, it's got a little bit of the sheath on it. This is the kind of a pattern that the folks in the UK have invented, and it is a good design. You notice it's similar to the Kephart. It's got a similar pattern of blade. The grip is very comfortable. This particular one is actually very inexpensive, made by a company called BPS Knives out of Ukraine. And they are still somehow producing knives, even in the middle of a war. I highly recommend these. I love mine. I've got a couple of them, and they are comfortable in the hand. They got that 90-degree spine for sparking ferro rods, and they go in about 30 to 40 bucks. And they come with an amazing sheath. Now, I didn't address sheaths very much, but a sheath is a very important part of your knife. If you've got a good knife with a terrible sheath, you're going to lose your knife, and then you don't have a knife anymore. Now, they make a wonderful sheath, and you can see, look down in there. It's solid leather. It's not put together. They got good rivets and stitching. And you can look at the welt, which is the extra bit of leather they put into the edge so that it reinforces it. And it has a regular belt loop and a dangler. Dangler is nice, so if you sit down, you don't get jabbed by the knife, and you're less likely to rip your sheath. You can make those out of a lot of things. All right, now let's get into some multi-purpose knives, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this knife here. This is the Seal Pup. All right, it's made by SOG. It is I consider to be a lesser quality knife, but for a purpose, it's not bad. This is what I would consider to be a emergency services knife more than a bushcraft knife. Can you use it in a bushcraft role? Probably. But the first thing we'll talk about is serrations. Now, a lot of knives, especially lesser knives, they feature serrations because the edge won't hold up. These, I haven't had a problem with this one too awful much, but I haven't put it through a lot of use either. But I know a lot of other people that carry them. They come with a really nice grippy plastic handle of some sort. They are a kind of stainless steel. I don't know what kind, to be honest. And yeah, it doesn't even say on it. They're kind of afraid to tell you what that is. It's probably a 420, 420 or 440C maybe, which isn't a bad steel, and it does hold up enough that it probably is. But the thing I want to talk about is that these are actually the kind of knives that, unless you're using them for a specific purpose, stay away from them, because they're kind of more meant for fighting, to be honest. But they're also really good for cutting rope and other emergency services tasks. And you find you don't care if it does get broken. But it does come with a MOLLE compatible sheath, which is a nice feature. These other ones, other than the SE4, which you can buy a MOLLE compatible upgrade for the sheath that it comes with. This one comes with a MOLLE compatible sheath, which means it'll mount onto your Condor MCR3 chest rig very easily. And it does have a pouch on the front. You can throw your multi-tool right into that pouch, so it gives you your functionality with that. So it is a good emergency services knife, but it's definitely what I would qualify as a special use knife, and not really one I'd recommend for the average ranger in the organization. All right, now we're going to get into big knives. Now, these can be controversial. Some people think, oh, you look silly because you got this big Rambo knife on your belt. And some of those knives are kind of crappy. But what we've got here are two different knives made in the USA. This one is the Ontario Fighter. I know it says Fighter on it, but I have used a couple of these in my life. It does not have a MOLLE compatible sheath, and I don't know if I'd want to strap it to my chest rig anyway. It's a big knife. But in lieu of a hatchet or tomahawk, a bigger knife such as this, or the one I'm going to show you next, is it's an okay choice. This is what would qualify as a survival knife. It does give you the ability to do different tasks with it. I believe there's a video of me using another knife of this size, made by Condor, for a draw knife, which means I just chunked a piece of wood into the point and then was able to created two handles for it. But this one's this is made by Ontario Knife Company, which is a U.S. company, and that's a really great thing to do, is to make sure you buy U.S. made products. If you're in the UK and you can pick up a UK made knife, you're putting money towards towards people in your area. If you're in Brazil, if you're with the Brazil Volunteer Rangers, again, this is a wonderful, it would be, you want to stick with your local. But if you don't, this is a great knife in general. And they go for about 45, 50 bucks. All right. Now, let's go to the wonderful world of high-end semi-production knives. Now, this one here holds a special place in my heart, okay? This knife was designed by, and I bought it from, Ron Hood. This has seen a heck of a lot of use, and I will not disparage this knife in any company. It holds a great edge. It's, again, another 1095 high carbon steel knife made by a company called Tops. This is the Tops Anaconda 9.5. This is their original version. The new version, which they still sell this knife, has some slightly different handle geometry, and maybe a few other things that I'm not aware of. But you'll see this Tano point, and some people like that's kind of mall ninja, and in some cases they might be right. But there's a very specific reason why Ron designed this Tanto point onto this knife. The whole idea is that a lot of times the saying is a big knife can do small tasks, but a small knife can't do big tasks. Well, if you'll allow me a little bit of fumbling here, one of the things about this bigger knife is that when you take it and you choke up, you can use that Tanto point as an entirely different knife and allow you to do a lot of smaller tasks. So you notice how I've done this. I've got it braced with the lanyard. I can do all kinds of little things with it. You can do this without the lanyard, but it's much handier. And that's how Ron intended it to be done. This is, again, it's a 1095 high carbon steel. It's got a traction coating. It's a black, what's it called, black traction coating, and a linen micarta handle. Micarta, just so you understand, is layer upon layer of of um, of cloth that's been glued together with something similar to epoxy, and that makes a very weatherproof grip. When you're looking at knives for the outdoors, micarta is hard to beat, okay, in terms of handle material. This is kind of a rubber handle. It's a plastic handle. There is a complaint that people have with wood handles that they warp or they rot. I haven't found that to be the case unless you're treating the knives wrong. But long story short, let's talk about one more just before we go. This is another first line. I meant to put this in the other first line. Tactical folders. A lot of guys carry these. I carry one. Obviously, it's in my pocket right now. This is an old one. This is actually a Spyderco Endura 1. I bought this in 2002. Spyderco makes a knife that, as long as you treat it right, it'll last for a very long time. This one's still going strong. I've actually bought other ones and given them away and gone back to this. But not to tell you to buy Spyderco, although you can't go wrong with a Spyderco. But these types of knives, these flip knives, are a great way to have how do I put it? A compromise. You know, a locking blade knife can be a good substitute for a fixed blade for some tasks. I wouldn't baton with them. But one of the things you want to think about, there are ones that have what are called a liner lock, and there are ones that have a axis lock, which you can't see here, and then you have what's called this is what's called a lock back, okay? And and I recommend any of the ones, good quality knives with a lock back. Now, like on the Buck 110, it's back here. But the reality is that this is one of the stronger locks you can get. It is a folding knife, and we actually don't recommend for youth members to get a folding knife as their first knife. I know the Boy Scouts and a few other organizations recommend have them get these, but these knives will fold up on your fingers like nobody's business. And as an adult, I've had that happen. As a kid with little fingers, that could be a catastrophe. All right. So to sum things up, knives in general are one of those things you want to give some thought to. They're not something you want to just go out to Walmart and buy the first thing that looks cool. And if in doubt, start out with the Mora. Any of the Mora line are great knives. And that gets you used to using knives. And that's something that is important, especially for people who aren't used to being outdoors. If you're new to the outdoors, is taking a tool into the field for the first time and not having any idea, not being used to using it. That's a problem. And that goes for people who are experienced in the outdoors. If you're going to buy a knife for the field, the first place you want to bring it is the kitchen. Cut up vegetables, cut up process chickens with it. Get yourself used to using it in that function, and then move on and practice in your backyard. Carve some sticks, make blunt sticks pointy. Do all the things you can think of to do. Add notches, make fuzz sticks. Do it at home. If you do happen to cut yourself, or the knife does fail on you, you're at home. Nothing wrong with, other than having to get a Band-Aid, and you're close to those sorts of things. You're close to the hospital if something terrible happened, which is not likely to happen, but you should know that you test your gear before you take it out into the woods. You get used to using that gear. If you've got brand spanking new gear you're opening up for the first time in the field, I'm going to leave you with this. Remember what new stands for. Never ever worked. Which means that you don't know. You have no idea. It's a question mark, and you want no question marks in the field, especially if you're out in the woods camping, or you're at a disaster, or you're doing a search and rescue. Any tool that you're carrying needs to be well thought out, and it needs to be proven. With that, hope to see you at the next United States Volunteer Rangers event. And if you want to join, check out usvrangers.org for more information. And with that, this is Major Sean Merritt, United States Volunteer Rangers, signing off.